Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the Samokhodnaya at YouTube with another model video. Today building the Eastern Express 172nd SU-122 Soviet Army World War II. This model came out during the approximate 80s and originates from Russia. The model includes 5 polystyrene runners of various colours, a sheet of decals, and a photocopied instruction sheet that seems to be hand-drawn and kind of cluttered, plus an entire hull component. The model is most likely a T-34 base with runners removed and extra runners added to make this variant. The runners also do not have numbers stamped in them, and I have to rely on the runner guide on the instructions to find out which components to cut out and glue together. Slightly a tedious process. The SU series are a line of assault guns for infantry support, turretless, all based off the T-34 chassis. This is an answer to the German field gun Stug 3, which has caused quite a bit of damage and was also an effective copycat in service. My intent is to build this model out of the box with traditional scale modelling method, the same double cut with nippers, clean up the nub and plastic cement components. Any seam lines that appear will be addressed with basic type filler putty and sanded 24 hours later. I jumped ahead in the instructions to deal with the fuel drums, drying time and putty sanding process. It went straight to the bottom of assembling and gluing the wheels, suspension and tracks. This is one of the models that require you to put together the lower chassis part by part and assemble in a very tedious process every component to make up the wheels and align them correctly in the side of the chassis. The slightest move can make it quite crooked and more difficult to assemble down the line. The edges require the track links to be individually glued together with longer pieces to go on the top and bottom, which looked better at the time than the rubber band method. This also needs to be aligned correctly to not provide any gaps and to look okay. I do struggle with this. It's not the funnest process, but this variation in doing it multiple times does look fairly okay. As you have noticed in the photos and video, the tooling is very interesting, especially with the amount of flash and a couple of parts deformed. I noticed the box contained a few extra components to make up for where large air bubbles does appear from the injection molding process. Older models with a few faults like this are not so common anymore and a bit of a rarity along the vintage collecting circles of scale models. The detail and proportions are not too bad at all. I do admit that I thoroughly enjoy cleaning up and snapping off over exaggerated flash marks. Pretty satisfying, and this kit is no disappointment. A bit of a background on how I acquired this model. When I was quite young, between 13 to 15, and building secondhand kits that I buy cheaply from my locally independently run hobby shops, I took an interest in competitive modelling and entered in the Model Expo at the showgrounds hosted by the IPMS in Melbourne, Australia. I was located in the intermediate category and at the time mostly built whatever aircraft or tanks I could get my hands on, some Warhammer subjects, and if lucky enough maybe a Star Wars model. The community was really cool and especially encouraging, and for anyone who were juniors or under the age of 18 were encouraged to continue and would be provided with a free model at the awards ceremony even if you did not place or win, which would normally come from the vast backlog collection of some of the older collectors or someone exiting the hobby, downsizing, or sadly deceased. This model was gifted to me. One of the first kits in my possession and the oldest model definitely acquired. I really wanted to do it justice and put it aside to build it at a later date once my skills went up. After moving in 2020 and having a look around my mother's place during a visit, I found it in an obscure location and was very excited to have a go at it, as 72nd Armour is definitely something I'm keen for, and was really happy I had the hindsight to hold on to a Soviet subject matter, which I do enjoy quite a bit nowadays. For an old model, the detailing and proportions is astonishingly pretty good, most likely due to the people tooling it having access to the real vehicle all the way in Russia. The downside, besides gluing the individual wheels to a not so stable surface and the track links, this model came with an insane amount of small and tiny parts, details and components, such as the racking for the fuel containers on the back and very small stowage. A few of these bits and pieces that are just not that visible I opted out and chose not to use. Besides that, it assembled very well, no obvious seams, and with one coat of primer excluding the fuel tanks and the barrel, looks pretty fantastic. Utilizing the APR wireless battery-powered airbrush, I used automotive filler primer thinned down with automotive lacquer thinner and sprayed this together to give a grey base to build up on paint. I really like the box art of the winter scheme of shoddily white applied over the existing factory green for the winter post-bulge push. This was done by modulation painting of the green of the three tones, a light, a middle green and a dark, to get the look of shaded colour. Then building up with hand painting streaks of white and light grey going across the vehicle, thinning down one paint quite a bit and applying it as a filter with extreme different thicknesses on different panels and components to look like a very rushed and poor paint job done in the field. Finally, with a very thin amount of white paint applied via airbrush in other areas to show some components were better painted than others. Utilizing a brush, components such as the rubber on the wheels, the tank tracks, any other details, stowage, lights were hand painted in lacquers. The water slide decals were still very serviceable and easily applied. Not a lot of time required to soak. A whitewash was applied, a clear coat and a black sludge wash to pick up all of the raised detail. Slight amount of soot build-up with an airbrush on the end of the gun turret and any exhaust vents. A touch-up of edging with a weathering pencil and various other weathering methods to build up that snow look. The new Mr. Hobby flat base and clear base were dusted on to seal everything. Even by today's standards, such as a Dragon kit or other Eastern European makers, this is a really good model. I thoroughly enjoyed it and it came together quite well. The time placed in putting it aside and investing it in now was completely worthwhile in getting my childhood model finished and to a decent standard depicting in the box art. Could not be more happier and kind of wish I had more variants from Eastern Express to play with and build. I have not put in any extra effort in this 72nd build compared to other tanks I've built recently and in the past, but this process just felt right and it came together quite nicely, and the weathering complemented it and finished the whole story that I was just aiming for. Yet still not 100% perfect, and a couple minor mistakes were done. Some of the processes were tedious, and a modern version of this kit would have been a lot easier to build and to produce a finished model. I can honestly say the good intent and the goodwill to give these models away for free to younger children interested and keen in history and the hobby has rewarded itself and turned around into to something that's pretty interesting. If my 13, 15-year-old self saw this finished on the competition table, I think he would have definitely liked this. Thank you very much for this gift and the opportunity to build this model and share it. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, stay tuned for further content, and we'll catch you all next time. Have a look at the description section for references, and catch you later.